In part two, I looked at certain biblical passages that argue for this pain is punishment theory. And now I'm going to move on to the Eastern angle on this same idea. And it is found in the Eastern idea of the law of karma. And this is generally credited to have started with Hinduism and then was spread on to most of the subsequent Eastern religions, Buddhism and Jainism and Sikhism. All right, now my feeling on the law of karma is that it's actually something of an improvement on the Western idea of pain is punishment. Because rather than saying something like, well, God's fury over the theft committed by the newborns Adam and Eve, that led to the punishment felt by every living creature, even kittens. That just seems a little overreactive. And I like the idea of karma a little better because it tells us that people, and well, I guess animals too, they're only punished for their own behavior. But the catch, however, is that it could have been misbehavior in this life or a previous life. All right, now I'm going to read a passage about karma and suffering from the Dalai Lama. And this is from his book, How to Practice, The Way to a Meaningful Life, pages 131 to 132. If suffering is insurmountable, then reflect on the fact that this trouble is due to your own actions in this or a previous life. Understanding that suffering comes from karma will bring some peace as it reveals that life is not unjust. Otherwise, sorrow and pain might seem to be meaningless. So, taking this to its logical conclusion, when it comes to, say, infants born with birth defects that are so severe that they suffer painful deaths in their early childhood, those born with holes in their stomachs or holes in their hearts or with bulging skulls because there's too much fluid in the brain, or those horribly deformed harlequin babies. And you'll find lots of videos of harlequin babies here on YouTube. The law of karma tells us that these suffering babies, they're not just arbitrary victims of life's indifference, life's cruelties. Instead, these infants must have been sadistic prison guards or murderers or something else horrible in their previous lives. So as for their short, pain-filled lives, it's just their deserved karmic punishment. And same thing, of course, with the victims of 9/11, all the other plane crashes throughout history, all the civilian Muslim and Israeli victims and the nonstop bloodshed that's going on in the Middle East, all the people killed in Hiroshima, of course, and with civilian casualties, the wars throughout history, victims of natural disasters worldwide. All of these so-called victims, they just must have done some awful stuff in their previous lives, and they were just getting what was coming to them. Now, we can find lots of pain is punishment explanations when we look at religions worldwide, but I won't go, at least for this video series, I won't go into any more of them because I think the general idea is clear enough. Now, some of these explanations sound, at least on the surface, very different from one another. For example, contrast the Bible's Adam and Eve story with the ancient Greek story of Pandora's box. Now, in the biblical story, it's, again, as I mentioned in a previous video, it's the talking snake that prompts Eve to take a bite of the enchanted fruit, and that's what made God so angry, that he cursed the ground, and we live in a fallen world. Now, in the ancient Greek version, or the ancient Greek story, I should say, the story was that Prometheus had stole fire from the gods and gave it to man. And that made Zeus so angry. He was so angry that humans accepted this stolen gift, that Zeus put death and disease and jealousy and hatred, and he put all these things into this box, and he sent it to Epimetheus, who was Prometheus' brother. And just to make sure mankind would, make sure this box would be unleashed, the poison would be unleashed upon mankind, Zeus also made this creature called a woman, Pandora, and sent her to live with Prometheus, because he also supplied her with a curiosity. He knew that she would open that box and spread disease and disaster. All right, I'm losing where I am here. Anyway, the Bible's explanation that we inherit sin of the humans who stole God's fruit is in a way similar to this Greek explanation that we inherit the sins of the humans who accepted fire, and that was a stolen gift from the gods. And the Eastern explanation about karma, it has some similarities too, because it also tells us that even apparently blameless victims, we can still be punished for inherited crimes. Now, another thing these explanations all have in common is that they're difficult to prove wrong, because they all have this convenient aspect of citing root causes that are unobservable. But my feeling is that these unobservable aspects, they put all these explanations in the same category as an explanation like evil and invisible space aliens are the root of cause evil. root of evil, or evil exists because the invisible pink unicorn wills it to be so. We can't prove either of those claims wrong either, especially given the claims of invisibility. But that's hardly a reason to accept any of these types of zero evidence-based explanations as correct, or even worth considering as possibly correct. My feeling is that this pain is punishment hypothesis, whether made by the claims of karma or the story of Adam and Eve or any other mythological tale of divine retribution, it's just the least satisfying of all the religious explanations for the cause of suffering. This pain is punishment idea explains only a limited number of observations for those who bring pain upon themselves. And it works to some extent for a limited number of those. But it just requires a torturous stretch of the imagination to try to explain it, to try to use that explanation for other categories. All right, but that's only one of the 7 supernatural explanations for the cause of suffering. And they're not mutually exclusive. They can work in combination with each other. All right, so let's move on to number 2.
Give me a sign. Hit me, baby, one more time. Oh, man, it was believer. Lady was deceiver. So the story goes, but you see, the snake was he.